Hey team, BC here, Big Country Hunting. So just a little bit earlier on said I'd make a small movie on roaring stags, red stags, and a little bit about some of the gear too that I've been using to roar stags in. And I don't profess to be the best stag roarer that's out there, but I do manage to get stags to come into me. So I'm just going to show you just a few different types of callers that you'll see out there. So you'll probably notice this one, which is the graph stag call. This is pretty cool. Anyone can use it. It does have some drawbacks. So on the back of it, it's got a list of different types of stag calls on there, and the first one that it comes on to is the seeker call. So that sort of sounds a bit like that. Which is great because pretty hard to imitate that if you're hunting seeker, but if you're hunting reds, every time this machine turns on it goes straight to the seeker call. And I have been in a situation where someone else is using one of these and stalking into the stag, and the first thing that happened when he turned it on, let out a seeker call and all the reds just disappeared. This has a series of different calls for reds on it for different situations. Not going to go through them because you can go and research it, but this is the electronic caller. So that's a good tool. I like this tool, and I'll often take it with me, especially if I'm hunting an area where there's both reds and fallow or seeker, because I can roar much better with them. Got the old favourite, the roaring horn. This is as good as you can make the sound that goes into it. It's designed to amplify the sound, and it normally gives quite a good throaty roar. Perhaps not as good as some of the cow horns, which have got a bit thinner, get a bit more resonance into the roar, but it works. So that's that one. Then I've got a this is a reed call. So it's got like a duck caller kind of in the end of it, and then a bit of tube. So this one sort of does more of an aggro, little moans and stuff like that, quite good in the tight bush. What I like about this is you can actually pull the caller part out and use it as a vacuum cleaner hose. So you know, if you don't have dollars to spend, you can go and find a bit of hose like this. It's going to do the same job. I've also in the past been able to call a deer in with a drink bottle that's been cut off, and then of course just using your hands. One thing to note with calling deer, and they've got very good hearing, really good hearing. I don't know how many times greater than ours is, but it's pretty good. So to let your roar out, it doesn't have to be a massive volume, especially if the stag's coming in closer proximity. And I just want to go through the last caller, which I really like if you're trying to call a stag in, is one of these guys. Now this is a UE boom speaker, Bluetooth speaker. If you can download stag calling apps and stuff like that on your smartphone, and you can connect it up to your Bluetooth speaker. Now if you're in a situation where you're trying to roar a stag in, this is the old classic where one hunter hangs back and it does the calling while the stag comes charging into the call, and the other hunter moves forward to take the animal out on its way into you. But if you are by yourself, of course that's not going to work very well, because you can't be in two places at once. Or can you be in two places at once? So by putting this little guy down below you in a nice little clearing, a nice clear place you can shoot, you can back up 30 to 50 meters and still get, depending on conditions, a Bluetooth signal through to your speaker. That way you can control roaring from a remote place while the animal comes in to find your roar. The only thing with this is you can't shift it if you need to, but hopefully you can get out of the wind and in a good place to see your stag coming in. So we talked about stags having really good hearing. You know, their ears, they can rotate around all different directions, and they use their ears as a unit to determine which direction the sound's coming from. So if you've ever actually watched the animals, they'll have one ear out like this and the other ear could be pointing out the side, and they keep flicking them around until they zoom in on whereabouts the sound's coming from. So when we're using these guys, if the animal's far away, you can point it in the direction of the animal and it's all going to be fine. But if the animal's moving in close to you, you want them to move into you, but you don't really want to be able to pinpoint exactly where you are by sound alone, because that may give away your position. So the great way to use these is to use them to bounce sound off objects, or point it down to the ground, or directly up at the sky. But when the animals are coming in close, don't point it right at the animal, because they may just pick up that it's not quite right, but they're also going to hone right in on your position. So if you've got trees around, you can bounce off trees up into the air or down to the ground to muffle the sound. But when the animals are coming in close, avoid directing your roars directly at the animal. The same with the roaring horn. If you're roaring and the animal's coming in, look at putting it on an angle out over your shoulder. So that's just a little barks and grunts, but that works pretty well in the bush. Cut. So when we look at our different types of devices for roaring deer, we're obviously there's two main differences between these two guys. This one is limited to the calls that it can make, and the volume can be adjusted. This one here, you can adjust your own volume and you can customize the noises you make to the deer. Same if you're using the old hose without the reed in it, you can also customize to the deer. Now, when a deer roars, it roars over its territory to try and assess if there's any other animals in the area. So the stag will roar, and then it would normally pause for a little bit and listen for a reply. Now during that time of listening, he's listening really intensely for where a potential reply is coming from. And as I said earlier, if you're roaring a stag that's way out, you just roar back at him and he's going to slowly move in. But if he comes in getting in really close, that pause may be 5 to 10 seconds or more. So if you roar too quickly, he will pin on your sound very quickly. So what is a good idea is to wait up to 30 seconds before you do that reply. And as the animal is moving in, there is a high probability that after 20-30 seconds that animal is starting to move. That allows you to roar and to also make movements at the same time. But just be aware, once you make a roar, he'll almost certainly stop and listen again for your position. So if you roar, you don't want to move 30 seconds to a minute. If he roars back at you, and then the chances are you wait 30 seconds, he will be starting to move out again. It gives you a chance to make a quick break and a bit of a move. You got to be aware with, and I said in the post that that the stags will come and try and cut around your wind, so you've always got to be conscious of where the wind is. Hence, if we use a remote device, we can set him up so he hopefully comes into the remote device and doesn't come in directly to you. Once again, the problem is you can't move so easily. Deer will respond to even some quite unusual noises. I've heard instances where there's been a gunshot and next thing the whole valley erupts in stags roaring. So, you know, your roars don't need to be super refined when the stags are on, and you don't need to make lots of big, loud, heavy, decent roars to get them going. It is a good idea to try and match, I'd more say the type of roar that the stag is making. So there's several different types of roars. There's a moan, which is they may do that at any stage. It's sort of a reaction. Then they've got quite a full-on high-tone roar, which would be one that they use for locating other animals. And then as they're getting more worked up, they tend to make some more aggressive growls and barks and grunts when they're coming in, and they're starting to get real stirred up. So that's when you want to be trying to mimic the type of roar that they're making while the deer is in that proximity. So some of the roars that I'll make using the roaring horn are, like I said, I'm not necessarily the best at roaring, but just for a general locator type roar, and for me that's enough. When they're starting to get a little bit more responsive, you can add a little bit more tone into it. If the animals are starting to approach you, you're starting to hear the aggressiveness, and that's when they're starting to get worked up. But on the other hand, just a little sometimes enough just to make it happen. The best thing you can do if you want to practice your roaring is go and find a deer farm. Find a local deer farm and just sit there by the fence and roar the deer. Ask the farmer if you need to, but there's plenty along the side of the road you can pull over and have a look. Anyway, that's my little 10 cents worth on roaring stags. Remember guys, you're out in the bush and it's in the roar. There's lots of animals roaring, making noise, but there's also lots of guys like me out there making noise as well. So, you know, guys, high vis, keep safe, make sure you identify your target. For hunters, it is the most exciting time of the year, but it's probably almost one of the most dangerous times of the year. There's a lot of people that'll get out in the bush and they may not go out a lot at all, and they're all hyped up for the roar, and they could be so sure that they're roaring a stag, and meanwhile it's another hunter coming in on them because they're stationary, and that's when accidents happen. So we just can't stress enough to positively identify your target. Everybody needs to go home at the end of the day, and it's everybody's responsibility. Anyway, cheers for watching guys, have fun in the roar, hope you get something. Cheers, eh?